What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, as always, guys. And today we are going to look at the Indianapolis Colts roster here post-draft and talk about who was positively and negatively impacted here by this 2025 draft. So starting with the positives here, Derek, I think you got to point to both quarterbacks who will be in competition, Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, because of what you did specifically in round number one. You went and you addressed the biggest glaring hole on this offense, and that was the tight end position. And Derek, we already know, we've talked about it a lot, this tight end position last year for Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco, it wasn't good enough. I mean, it's not like Joe Flacco came in and the tight ends were suddenly good. They just weren't good all year long. And you absolutely needed an upgrade there. And Tyler Warren comes in off a 100-catch, 1,200-yard season, and you look at that and you say, man, if that can't help these quarterbacks become what you hope they can become, then I don't know what can at this point. So in terms of a pass catcher that helps in the intermediate, over the middle, type of, passing part of the offense, you can't go wrong with this with Tyler Warren. He's the best guy, I think, out there that can help you in terms of the rookies you could have brought in. So what were your thoughts there on the two quarterbacks being positively impacted by what the Colts did?
Well, it's always a positive impact whenever you add a reliable pass catching weapon that really comes hand in hand with it. And I mean, it also hand in hand helps with Jonathan Taylor as well, which we're going to mention here in a minute. We kind of mentioned it. We're going to mention him with another athlete as well. But Tyler Warren really just positively impacts the entirety of this offense in totality, especially the quarterbacks, of course, because you get another reliable weapon that you can utilize in a lot of different ways. And it's another thing, too, for the goal line packages, like we said before. And there's going to be sometimes Anthony Richardson doesn't have to have the ball in his hands in order for this team to make a play. Sometimes you're going to be able to have a Jonathan Taylor or a Tyler Warren now to be able to, have some interesting play designs that are going to hopefully impact the ability to get those short yardage gains. So definitely a huge boost to an offense, and especially the quarterbacks, to have a guy that, can do a lot of great things for you as long as he is put in the right way to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you saw what Penn State did with him a year ago. He lined up everywhere. So that's only going to help your offense in general, specifically quarterback. And, also just in terms of running the football, that takes pressure off these quarterbacks too. So that's definitely a positive thing. And also RB1, who you mentioned, Jonathan Taylor, bringing in a guy like DJ Giddens, I think definitely is a very positive thing for Jonathan Taylor, because now you feel like you have two capable backs here in him and also Khalil Herbert, who you brought in free agency, that you really do believe can help you out. And also from a longevity standpoint, Derek, help JT take a little bit less off of his shoulders, right? Because we know there's durability concerns there with JT. He's missed time because he's been the primary back for the last number of years. Even when he had Zach Moss, he still had some injuries. So when looking at the running back position and obviously how poor it was a year ago, Jonathan Taylor was your only back you trusted last year to handle the ball on a consistent basis. Now you potentially have two guys here that you feel like if JT needs, a little bit of a break, say he's a little bit banged up or he just needs a breather, you can have some backs in here who could potentially, it can't get much worse than it was a year ago, but you actually don't lose all that efficiency that you had. It was a complete 0 to 100 when Jonathan Taylor was out versus when he was in. It was completely different, but it may not be as wide of a gap this year. And certainly from what the Colts have already done in free agency and already done in the draft now, it definitely seems like you already have two backs that you project as better than your RB2 a year ago. So when looking at JT and just the injuries and, say you're vying for a playoff spot, you want him as healthy as you possibly can down the stretch, especially if you're playing against teams in your own division. and, playoff teams and stuff. And even if you do somehow get into the playoffs, you need a healthy JT to help you. So I think just when you talk about the stable of running backs you have in there, and you obviously still have Tyler Goodson in there as well. So you have 3 running backs that in some capacity you feel confident in. I really do believe, Derek, that is going to help JT out long term this season.
Yeah, and before I even get into the Giddens part of it, I mean, again, like I said, with Tyler Warren also being a part of this now, talk about certain situations, like I said, in the goal line situations where, Jonathan Taylor, if you have Tyler Warren and Jonathan Taylor now back in the backfield with Anthony Richardson, the number of people that linebackers now have to focus on going forward is, I mean, remarkable. I mean, just to know that any one of those 3 guys can have the ball in their hands at any given moment is going to help JT a lot because, again, it allow him to get more amount of touchdowns in those certain circumstances, can just also make it easier to be able to get yardage when he's in that situation. It'll be great for him because, again, we can utilize that in a lot of different ways. But yeah, having Giddens and Khalil Herbert now, is so big for Jonathan Taylor. Like you said, 2 formidable backs that can take snaps for you in any given moment of time and can be those guys that, can help in pass pro, be more, maybe a little more effective in those RB screen game than what Jonathan Taylor tends to be. So, yeah, it'll be able to allow Jonathan Taylor to, maybe not take quite as much punishment. I mean, don't get me wrong, Jonathan Taylor will still be probably getting 20 plus touches a game, but, maybe instead of 30 plus, instead it's just 20 plus instead. Maybe those few extra snaps can really do a lot of good for you as time goes along. I mean, I know it's different between the pros and college, but I mean, just look at what, 2 running backs at Ohio State did this last year with Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. When you get 2 guys that, have somewhat similar skill sets, but are set apart in 2 different ways, but guys that can equally share the load, that stuff that keeps you fresh. As we saw in the college football playoff, Judkins and Trevion Henderson were both insanely fresh, and they were just running over people still at that time of year after playing 16 games. So it gets to be a point where it would be great if Giddens and Herbert can, take 10 touches away per game from Jonathan Taylor, because then, that'll allow Jonathan Taylor, as time goes along into the season, for him to be more healthy and just not have as much wear and tear on him towards the end of the season, and a season where we're definitely going to need him.
Yeah, I was just kind of looking here a little bit on Jonathan Taylor's stats from a year ago. And, obviously he missed a little bit of time there. So he played in 14 games a year ago. He had 303 carries. That's not even factoring in, the catches that he had as well, which was 18. So, I mean, you're talking about over 300 touches in 14 games, a little under 22 carries per game last year. So you think about that. Like, instead of the 22 to 23 range, what if he's down to 17 or 18? Like, how much does that add up over the course of a season that could truly help him out in so many capacities? Because, I mean, we saw it, Derek. Like, he was so efficient last year when he had the ball, but maybe you trade a little bit of a few of those touches, but you still have that efficiency from Jonathan Taylor, and you have a couple other guys in, Khalil Herbert and obviously DJ Giddens, who you look at their yards per carry as well. It's pretty darn good. It's pretty darn good. Over 6 yards per carry for both of them, in the last couple of years. So definitely very, very impressive there. So I just think all those things will definitely contribute a lot when it comes to that and taking the load off of JT a little bit more, especially because we know the offense flows through Jonathan Taylor in this running game. So if you're able to take a little bit of pressure off of him, I mean, just think about that. If you go from, like I said, 22 carries to 17 or 18 carries, I mean, over the course of 17 games, that adds up, Derek. 3, 4, 5 carries less. That adds up a lot. in a very positive way. So I would be so interested to see how this running back room, kind of shakes out from a touches standpoint. But I think it definitely will positively impact JT because it'll allow him to take, more time that he needs to be as efficient as he can, but also not miss as many games, hopefully. That's the goal, right? And I think we kind of saw a little bit of that vision when the Colts initially drafted JT in 2020. I think the idea was him and Marlon Mack could be a really, really nice 1-2 duo, right? They could really help each other and complement each other in a lot of ways. Obviously, Marlon Mack went down early in that season, and the rest is history. That Marlon Mack was never truly the same, and the Colts moved on from him. But could DJ Giddens potentially be that player that they were looking for and hoping for when they initially had Marlon Mack back in 2020, coming off, obviously an incredible season that he came off over 1,000 yards in 2019? Like, could they potentially do that? And I think if they could, Derek, that would definitely be helpful for, this Colts running game. So maybe that's the vision here, and the Colts try to do that here with DJ Giddens and Khalil Herbert. And if they do, I definitely think it will help JT in the immediate, but also long-term down the course of the season. So, all right, let's continue on. A couple more positives we want to talk about. The last one on the offense, let's talk about Matt Gonsalves. And I'm viewing this more, Derek, in the fact that the Indianapolis Colts, they had chances, but they decided to not address the interior of the offensive line. In fact, they went and they took an offensive tackle in round 4, which would seem to indicate they believe potentially a guy like Matt Gonsalves could slide inside at guard. So how it positively impacts Gonsalves is he has a really good shot to potentially start this year, Derek. He has a good chance to be one of the starting 5 offensive linemen here. What are your thoughts on how the Colts addressed it and how that impacts Gonsalves positively?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it being positive in the fact that, Matt Gonsalves, it looks very clear that, God forbid, he messes it up somehow. It sure looks like he's going to be the right guard of the future. Now, obviously, the Indianapolis Colts, they still have the offseason until training camp gets there. And during that time, you can find a guard somewhere that can come in and do that. But, at the end of the day, do you really want to do that right now and, not give Gonsalves the chance to get that starting experience that he definitely needs? And, he was there for half the season last year, Cody, and was starting half those games and did just fine. I mean, you had people saying that they noticed very little difference in how he performed versus what Braden Smith typically performed. And everyone's just like, okay, you can get behind this. I mean, sure, looked like he did just fine to most people. So might as well just go ahead and allow him to be in that spot and say, we're giving you this opportunity. This is yours to lose. So go out there and seize it. And so, of course, that's a positive impact for him because he's pretty much the odd man out when it comes to this whole offensive line right now. The whole question was during the draft, are they going to draft a guard within those first 4 rounds to, try and go against Matt Gonsalves in some way? But even Shane Steichen saying during the end of the draft presser that, yeah, they've thought about putting Matt Gonsalves at right guard, and that's something they continue to discuss, that might be a realistic possibility. So, yeah, I mean, sure sounds like that's likely going to be the scenario unless they find someone else somehow in the offseason to still come to Indy.
Absolutely. Well, a couple other positions we thought they might address decently early, but they really didn't, was the defensive tackle position and also the linebacker position. Now, to be fair to the linebacker position, Chris Ballard did clarify the Colts are going to play a lot more, nickel and dime packages, a lot more DBs on the field than they have, in the past. And so that potentially could contribute. They did draft, Hunter Wohler in round 7, converted safety. But when you look at it, Derek, there's 2 guys that really, I think, are 2 different things here for how the Colts didn't address it that I think positively impacts these certain players. You talk about the backup defensive tackles here, a guy like Neville Gallimore, who you signed in free agency. You could even throw in a guy like Tim Smith, potentially even Adibaware as well. Like you throw in a couple of those guys there on the interior defensive line, and then you throw in Jalen Carlisle at that other linebacker position. Some young guys that you're going to believe in here. You're going to believe can be that depth for you. Obviously, they still could address it in some way, but what were your thoughts just on how the Colts didn't really address defensive tackle or linebacker here?
Yeah, going into it here, obviously, whatever backup defensive tackles you currently have on the roster are probably feeling pretty dang good right now. Of course, they added Tim Smith in there. How much impact does that really have? I have no idea. But yeah, we all certainly thought that the Indianapolis Colts were going to take a defensive tackle much sooner than what they did in this draft, which I still to this moment think that was a mistake, that the Indianapolis Colts didn't take a better one earlier. But I think, Cody, that once that third and fourth round started happening, they started losing a bunch of guys in the defensive tackle room that they really wanted, and then just didn't quite go for one. I don't know, but that definitely is a shock. And yeah, the backup defensive tackles you have currently are feeling really good about it. Looking just at them, out of Tommy Watt, of course, Neville Gallimore, who really hasn't done much of anything in his young career so far. So don't know how to feel about it right now. Certainly not feeling very happy about it. Of course, with the linebacker position, again, like you said, Carlisle's got to be feeling really good about it. Of course, with this defense changing the way that they felt the need to take less of a chance on a linebacker because they are going to be using less of them this year. So maybe not as big of a need to bring in as many. So obviously Carlisle sees that as his opportunity to get his first full-time starting gig in a defense here and take advantage of it. And I certainly hope he does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll have to see. Do the Colts address that in any way, or do they believe in these young players? We've seen it do both sometimes, so you never truly know here. But as it stands right now, those guys were definitely winners. All right, let's move on to the negatives now, Derek. So there was quite a number of guys that you could point to who were negatively impacted here. At some positions we expected, and some at some positions we didn't necessarily expect. So the first one you got to talk about is a guy like Tyler Goodson. RB3 last year, had some opportunities last year to potentially even be RB2. When Trey Sermon was kind of struggling, really wasn't being super efficient. But now the Colts have brought in not just one, but two new running backs into this room. We obviously talked about them a little bit earlier, but a guy like Tyler Goodson now, Derek, could be relegated to RB4 or potentially practice squad.
Yeah, so that running back room now, DJ Giddens being in this sort of circumstance, yeah, it definitely makes you wonder what is going to happen to the bottom end of the running back group for the Indianapolis Colts. Tyler Goodson is definitely going to be, that odd man that's going to be very interesting. Likely is going to get placed on the practice squad. I don't know how many running backs you would actually keep on your roster, Cody, but I know it's typically 3 to 4. But yeah, you drafted DJ Giddens, and I don't know if you can keep. I don't see any situation unless DJ Giddens just doesn't come prepared for training camp. I don't see a situation in which Giddens isn't at least RB3 on this roster going forward. I like Tyler Goodson. I really do. I just think that DJ Giddens, the possibilities you get, I just think he's a little bit more explosive. I think he's going to make more people miss than a Tyler Goodson would. I think that, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Tyler Goodson and all of this. Does he still beat out DJ Giddens? That'll be an interesting story to follow as training camp goes along. Who's getting more of those snaps? I really hope that it isn't going to be a situation of, Goodson gets taken just simply or gets put in front of Giddens just because he's been in the system longer. I certainly hope that that's not the case. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see who that RB3 is as we go through training camp.
Definitely. And then also, I mentioned already with Jalen Travis, who you drafted in round 4, the Indianapolis Colts have a competition at that swing tackle. That's Blake Freeland and now Travis that you're adding in there. Could this be a potentially really bad thing for Blake Freeland, right? I mean, obviously he was on the roster and he wasn't the primary swing tackle last year, but Derek, he had a chance here this year to potentially become that swing tackle and potentially even, I know some people won't like this, but I mean, he had a chance, at least, call it as small as you want. He had a chance next year to potentially be that right tackle of the future. Now, he hasn't shown the signs at all to be that. But now you bring in another guy, a guy that's very talented, very gifted in Travis, and he could potentially be that guy even here his rookie season that could beat Blake Freeland out. So Blake Freeland doesn't have a clear shot to even be the backup swing tackle this year. What are your thoughts there on just how Blake Freeland was negatively impacted by this?
Yeah, I mean, they brought in a tackle that, can come in and, maybe take a chance and be that swing tackle for this team going forward. Because obviously, whenever you've had to put in Blake Freeland, it has not worked out so far. And, Blake Freeland was also brought in, Cody, kind of under the same impression as a Jalen Travis. Jalen Travis is a little bit bigger than Blake Freeland, obviously, but Blake Freeland was this big tackle that, had the athletic traits and, come in and hopefully, be able to handle some things. And, from the moment Blake Freeland stepped on the field, we know that Blake Freeland is just not up for the task. So you bring this guy in that's competing right there with you to take your spot. Yeah, it certainly isn't looking great for Blake Freeland right now.
Yeah, again, we'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, certainly wasn't great for Blake Freeland and his chances here. But again, they have to compete. We'll see. Maybe Freeland does surprise a lot of us. All right, let's continue on here, Derek, into the next group here that was negatively impacted by the Indianapolis Colts and how they attacked the draft. You got to talk about the starting defensive tackles. We mentioned how, some of the backups were positively impacted. But when you look at the two starters, you still don't have super depth that you trust right now. So does that mean that DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, they see the field a ton this year again? And they don't, kind of unlike Jonathan Taylor, right? They don't get the opportunity to rest because if they are not on the field, it might spell disaster for your defense.
Yeah, we said it last year. I mean, a lot, Cody. Even before last year. I mean, we've been saying it for what I feel like is the last 3 years. That when DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart come off the field, this defense is just atrociously bad, especially at stopping the run. And that was why I think it was in 2023. I mean, DeForest Buckner was literally on the field like 91% of the time. Like they could rarely take him off. They could rarely take him off because there's nothing else in the middle. And of course, when you take Grove off, you see a massive drop in protecting the run. And then if you take DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart off, it's a huge drop off. So it's a really bad situation for the starters right now because once again, Ballard did not address it really. I know Tim Smith was brought in, and you certainly hope that he can fill some run stopping ability for Grover Stewart. But do we have any confidence in any of these players, Cody, to be able to come in and, replace DeForest Buckner on the interior of the defensive line? No, there's nobody. So it's definitely a major concern because, in 2022 and 2023, Defoe started like wearing down as the year went on. He wasn't effective near the end of those seasons because he barely came off the field. And so that's going to be a major concern for the Indianapolis Colts if they don't address it in some way, shape, or form before the season starts.
Yeah. Again, I hope I'm wrong. Hope we're wrong on some of these guys. Hopefully they come out and they ball out. We would love that. But definitely a little bit concerned there. All right, let's continue on. Let's talk about the last position group that was negatively impacted here, Derek. I kind of threw in three guys here, and stay with me here, okay? I threw in Juju Brents, Samuel Womack, and Corey Ballantyne. And the reason why I threw that in is because of the Colts' third round selection there, Justin Wally, the cornerback out of Minnesota. So that kind of threw a little bit of a wrench into what we thought potentially could be the pecking order for the cornerbacks this year, right? Because you kind of have an idea roughly. I mean, some people would say potentially cornerback 2 is still in question. But in my mind, Derek, it's Javarius Ward, Jalen Jones on the outside, and Kenny Moore in the slot. I mean, that's what I think based off of production, based off of, health and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of what I thought. But when you look beyond that, you have three guys here that you don't really know what their role is going to be with the team this year. You have Brent, who, as talented as he is, he can't stay on the field. And frankly, Derek, the first couple of years, he's been made out of glass. He just has not been available when you need him to be. Now, in the games he's played, he's looked pretty good. But that's the problem. He hasn't played a lot. Then when you look at Samuel Womack, I mean, Derek, you brought him in last year off of waivers, and I thought, all things considered, he played really well for you, given the circumstance. But again, it's a new defensive coordinator, and we don't really know what his role is going to be. And then the final one you bring in, Corey Ballantyne. I mean, he's been more of a special teams guy. But you look at this roster now, Derek, you got like 7 corners that could realistically make the roster. So who's going to be the odd man or odd men out here? That's the big question for me.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, who is going to be that odd man out? It'll definitely be very interesting to see what corners. I mean, I got to assume, of course, Kenny Moore, Travarius Ward, Jalen Jones, that's going to be your starting 3. Juju, Justin Wally, and then I assume you're going to have 6 corners in Womack there as well because, you have such a deep group. You don't want to take the chance on Womack leaving. And, Ballantyne is going to be potential odd man out there because, he's really only going to be a special teams guy. I don't know. There will definitely be some questions about how it goes. For me, Juju Brents, it matters less about what happened in the draft, more so matters about his own health. That's really the only thing that's stopping him. The only reason why Jalen Jones is the starting cornerback besides Travarius Ward is, Juju's health is the number one thing. He's got to focus on getting himself right. But you're right. When it comes to Womack, does Wally take over for him in a few ways? Ballantyne, where does he go? Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this cornerback room shakes up.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just kind of wondering, did any of these guys have position flexibility to safety? Because it's like you have so much depth at corner, and you don't have a lot of depth at safety. So, that's kind of my first thought. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you don't. And maybe you still bring in somebody at that third safety position. But isn't it kind of odd? I kind of thought about that. Your corner room is so deep, and your safety room is just not, at all, beyond your 2 starters. So, I don't know. Is there a guy they identify and say, hey, in our system, we like him better as a safety? Do you take a chance on one of those guys and say, hey, have you thought about making the transition here? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that, but we'll have to see when it comes to that. But guys, that does it for who we believe were the most positively and negatively impacted by the 2025 NFL draft. Curious what you guys would say about this. Are there any other players that you would add to this list on the positive or the negative side? Let us know all those things in the comments down below. Guys, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, be sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, all that good stuff. But again, guys, that'll do it for this one. Thanks so much. And as always, go Colts.